Yeah, super happy and thankful that you can come back at the stream. It's been a while, but you just had Brendan and Andrew on, and that was an absolutely fantastic stream. Thank you for bringing them on. That was really good.
Yeah, I'm trying to work my way through the whole Tochnyi team, just so you're all welcome. Pop along, but that was really good to talk about. Really important but pretty macabre subject of the murder of Kherson civilians attacked by those Russian drone teams, and it's pretty despicable. I see pretty much everything that happens in Kherson as from the Russians as terrorism, outright terrorism. You can apply that across the front lines, I guess, to different degrees. But yeah, so really good to have you guys on. I suppose the topic of the week is these, and I'm sure Daniele is going to talk about his work that he's been doing looking into this, but the strikes on these ammunition depots that I don't know whether you can call it a game changer, but it seems to have got people rather excited. Would you say it's a game changer in any way?
Well, I don't think it's a game changer until we can see them do it consistently and also probably with even further reach. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ammo depots in Russia,
True.
but this is definitely a new element to the war, I would say. That Ukraine is able to strike big logistic facilities that are that far from the front lines and also succeed pretty well as well. So yeah, Daniele is arriving. I think he's trying to get his kids to sleep. But Brian here has been really the brain and the driver behind the initial battle damage assessment that we spent quite a while on at the end of this week. I mean, we had 2 long nights to together as a team putting them out. So yeah.
I suppose it depends whether there are. When I talk about game changer, it depends in what context you're talking about, of course, and it's a phrase that's used all too often. But there does seem to be a bit of a step change in terms of the size of these strikes. So I've talked for a long time about wanting to see Ukraine strike at serious targets, big targets like refineries, and not hit them with 1, 2, 5 drones, but actually 100 drones, like properly take a target out, totally overwhelm any kind of defenses that might be there and destroy the thing so it's not coming back in a hurry. And to see that being done to ammunition depots is super good, I think. And also, if they are using something like there are rumors they might have used an adapted Neptune missile with like a triple warhead or whatever, you get these different rumors, you just don't know. But if they are able to use a missile at that distance into Russia and Russia are unable to do anything about it, then it kind of opens up a whole slew of possibilities for Ukraine.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna necessarily go into what it
No.
was, but I don't think it's that significant either what it was, as long as they can reliably do it. Um, what has been your kind of impression from the your you do a lot of daily observations, and there's been a lot of talk, and I'm always a little bit scared of being, hyping things. So I think we tried to be as conservative as we could with the battle damage assessments, but there's been a lot of different chatter.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because actually this is kind of one of my main points I wanted to bring up is that, and I may have talked about this with you guys before, but there are different ways to evaluate how well or badly any side is doing in this war. And it's very easy to get on a micro. So I do mapping, and I use Andrew Perpetua's map and Surat maps, and I synthesize the two, and I look at how each side is doing on the front lines. And when you get your head deep into the mapping world and you're looking at fields and tree lines, you can get very depressed about the state of affairs for the Ukrainians, particularly at the moment, with the Russians, I think, throwing everything and the kitchen sink at the Ukrainians. I think they're trying to do that ahead of the weather changes, and also just fully culminating and running out of stuff. They're just throwing everything they possibly can. And when you look at it from the micro level, it can get a little bit depressing for the Ukrainians, because the Russians are making, although Kursk, I think, has been particularly good for a number of different reasons, but it's very easy to think that, oh, woe is Ukraine. But when you zoom out to a macro level and you start understanding the war, or the battles, even the tactical and the operational in the strategic context, and when you start understanding all of these different ways of looking at the war and trying to work out where the asymmetries lie and who has the advantage in any given domain, you're trying to understand the politics, the economics, the financial. You're trying to understand the sanctions. You're trying to understand personnel issues, labor shortages. You're trying to understand military aid from different countries. You're trying to understand, huge like $35 billion frozen assets underwritten loan that's going to be paid back by the frozen assets profits. And you're looking at all these different things, and every time you're looking at something that Ukraine gets or receives, the question is always, well, what does Russia get as well? So is there a true asymmetry here? And when $35 billion is coming in from the EU, what's coming in for Russia? And you start understanding that actually there's an awful lot to be quite not happy about, but confident about with regard to the outcome of this war in terms of Ukraine. And I think that these strikes in the last week have shown what Ukraine could do when they get the right kit and the right permissions to do stuff. It's a very simple thing. You just need more stuff than the other team, and you need to be able to use it better than them. And where they have mass over you need to have precision to overcome mass, and you need to do things much more efficiently in a cleverer way than them, because they have more of whatever it is. And so I think there's a lot to be happy about, and this, not happy, but do you know what I mean? Confident that Ukraine are on something of the right track, especially when you see events like this week.
Yep, absolutely. Having overmatch is something that is crucial. I think we're gonna introduce Brian. He has prepared some words for what we did the last few days with regards to the battle damage assessment. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Erlend. This last week has been a complete doozy, to be honest. We have around 3. Oh yeah, thank you for this. This is actually the Toropets 1 assessment, and this the entire section that has been imaged right now over here, which has the red dots on them, are confirmed. And this is the new section apparently, which was being built to store more ammunition for the front lines. They started to build it around 2017 or 2018, and this is actually a box, like a it's a according to the NATO standards, it should be a box ECM, but these guys did not dig it that deep according to the other, like the images that we saw like in the earlier days during 2019 or 2018 or 2019. Daniele is going to make a good assessment about it, because he's the one who uh, uh, found out about it a lot, because he's our ammo expert, to be honest. And yeah, Joseph, it's been all week BDA and BDA. So
Yeah,
uh,
so just to interrupt you a little bit there, we've been criticized for a couple of things. One was the fact that we used a lot of acronyms that we didn't explain in our first thread. So we tried to correct that in the second thread by explaining all the acronyms. And BDA means battle damage assessment. It's something you do after, for instance, a strike, where you gather intel about the damage that your strike has inflicted on the enemy. And yeah, maybe before we go into the details too much, can you say very shortly how you go about doing that, Brian? Not don't go too far into it because it would take us all day. But
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the only thing that helps you is gonna be high resolution imagery, very high resolution imagery to be exact. And if you don't have access to that, I mean, like most of the OSINT have lost it completely, but some of us who work in the industry still have it, so we are able to actually derive some data from it. And to be honest, Erland, if you go to picture 3, actually, I'm going to show you guys something beautiful. This is the SAR imagery and Maxar's imagery. Can you zoom in a bit on the middle one? If you look properly over there, that 82 meters wide crater captured by satellites from Umbra was captured during the initial ammo explosions. And this is where we think, like our assessment is, where the more flammable ammunition was stored, like the KN-23 that has been rumored to be stored over there. And the new ones, actually, due to their poor construction, some of them just like overheated. Basically, if you like see high resolution images of it, they basically just overheated and then they just blew up. You can go up, actually. Yeah, that's a great image taken by the folks at Umbra. You can see over there, those craters, those ones are, we think, where these missiles or drones, whatever the Ukrainians are using, actually struck. And then the heat, the extreme heat that was generated by it, actually just spread around. You can go to image 2 now, to basically show you this is how how it looked during the initial stages. Like this is the shortwave infrared band, which allows you to see through fire a bit. I mean, not through fire, through smoke. And you can see those the middle areas that are completely damaged. And over there on the left hand side, the old ammunition storage, you can also see that area has like completely been created because of these ammo explosions. There is also a train that didn't blow up, uh, but it has been completely destroyed. It's only visible in high resolution imagery, that which I checked out thanks to some folks. This, by the way, is the 107th arsenal. Uh, you guys can now like move to the next imagery of the 23rd GRAO arsenal. That's the next one. Yeah, this was the most recent strike that we had images of. Same story. Most of the again, this is the shortwave infrared band, allows you to see through smoke a lot.
Sorry, Brian, can I just to interrupt? Sorry, to let viewers know that in case they don't know. So the first one was Toropets, and that was in the Tver region, which is on basically on a par with Moscow, about 500 kilometers north of the Ukrainian border. And this second one that you're talking about now is 16 kilometers, about 9-10 miles south of that first one. So it was just to let people know that on different nights these two were struck.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for that. This is one is the most recent one. The Actually, the 23rd the GRAO arsenal was oh yeah. Thankfully, someone pulled up Andrew's map. Y- I think that's the one. Yeah, that's the one over there. The one that's on the top is the 107th that got hit the first day, and second would be just 16 or 15 kilometers away is the second one. That's the 23rd GRAO arsenal. There was some ammunition over there, but the explosions were not that spectacular, to be honest. I mean, if you're measuring it through explosions, then nah. But the next one, the one in Tikhoretsk, the that's the most important one. I think you can go to the Tikhoretsk image now. Yeah, that's the area. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I'm just showing it on the map so you can see all the three different ones are. I mean, the arsenals are very far apart. Yeah, 1,300 something kilometers apart.
Yeah, there is an important thing about this ammo depot actually. The ammo depot actually hosted North Korean ammunition. It was modified around like early days of 2023 when the first reports came in. They started to dig more revertments to actually accommodate more ammunition. I think Mr. Tatargami did a good thread on it. And yeah, when I reviewed images as well, you could see trains going in and out every day, basically carrying the shipping crates, which brought in the North Korean ammunition. I think you can switch over to that image to actually show people uh, the diggings that were done, the new revertments, if possible. The next image, yeah. Zoom into the Amber Depot region. The one beside it is. So if you look carefully over there, there have been new revertments that have been built to store these ammunition from North Korea. And this was a sort of a priority target that Ukrainians wanted to hit but were not able to hit. And now, like from the resolution that we have, we think that some major parts are actually still on fire to to this hour that I last checked using firms. And so glad they have hired us. Yeah, because they are Radio Free Europe and they would have hired us. The one that's the near it, that's the aerodrome, and frankly, there were a bunch of Su-35s over there, and we still have not ascertained if they have been damaged because I don't have that kind of resolution as of yet. Right now, I still haven't found it. Uh, that's also, and the best for the last is the RS-28 Sarmat failure that happened in the Ples Cosmodrome.
This is a bonus segment.
This is a bonus segment for you guys. Maxar took beautiful imagery of that place. You can see the thing exploded in its own silo, and also for some, I think it's most probably fuel that also went around into the forest. If you carefully see in the image, there are red fire trucks that are trying to put out the fires that have been raging. If you zoom out a bit, you can see the fires on up on the north. uh yeah, those ones, yeah. It has basically set fire to this forest, and there are fire trucks that are responding to it. You can go to another image that is basically a close up of that. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
just to
Yes.
explain. So what happened here is that one of Russia's intercontinental ballistic missiles called Sarmat exploded inside the launch silo.
Yeah, they were testing it. They were scheduled to test it. I think it blew up during its fueling stage. That's what the unofficial assessment is as of now. We have not heard anything from the Russian news sites as of yet. And I don't think they're going to be talking about it because this is like a major kick to their proverbial balls, to be honest. Because RS-28 Sarmat was touted to be one of their best, and this was supposed to go to Washington. I think that it has failed to even leave its
Haven't they only had one successful launch in 4 or something like that?
Yes, yes. This incident in the Plesk Cosmodrome will actually set their testing schedule back by a lot, because building a silo and all the electronics that are involved in it and everything, it's going to take a lot of time, and now they do not have the time or the effort to even rebuild these things, because it's rumored that some of the components that are used in the RS-28 are from the West. So so we have to look what's going to happen. That's all for my segment.
Could you show us, Erlend, the Tikhoretsk explosion picture again that was on Andrew's map? I just want to point something out on that. Just that image would be quite useful. Sorry to cause you to, yeah. So just on there, down in the one in Rostov-on-Don, Rostov Oblast. Sorry. Once you get those off, you see that massive explosion. That was a truly impressive explosion. The reason why that was burning so brightly is because that was all the red lines that Russia had stored up in that ammunition depot, and all the red lines were just burning and burning. And hopefully Biden can look at that and go, "Oh, right, turns out that nothing is going to happen," and lift restrictions. Anyway,
I love that. Thank you, Jonathan.
No problem. But on a serious note, you know, when you're trying to work out, you know, trying to work out escalation management, right? It's serious. The thing is, if you get this wrong, right, and this is why I have some sympathy for Jake Sullivan. I know that's going to be highly controversial because I actually disagree, but I can understand why Jake Sullivan and others, whoever they may be, might be very cautious, because if you get it wrong, you have a nuclear war, right? And that's the sort of thing you don't want to get wrong, right? So I understand over caution being employed. But on the other hand, if you're looking at the form of Russia, if you're using a bit of inductive reasoning, like this horse, how many times has it lost a race? Well, it's lost a race every single time it's run. So how many times has Russia lied about red lines? Every single time they mention red lines. Okay, so what do I think about this horse in the next race? Well, the odds are on for this horse to lose. So the odds are on for Putin not to cross any red lines. And you can look at the rationale for using nukes, because it's going to be just suicidal. Not only did China being very strong, the only thing they're strong on with regard to Russia is not using nukes. And we know that the US and NATO have warned Russia that if they use nukes, they'll get their whole like Arctic fleet sunk, or whatever the threat has been. I don't know, but it's about using conventional warfare to wreak havoc on the Russians. So like, I think we are well justified in believing that actually Russia won't escalate in any meaningful way. And then the other question is, well, what are the ways that Russia can escalate? So is it just about nukes, or is there something else they can do? And of course, there are plenty of other options. And then the question is, okay, well, why would Russia want to escalate? So what is a reason for Russia escalating? Is it to speak to their own population about how strong they are and say, you know, flexing for their own domestic audience? Is it about flexing to the international audience? Is it about posture, or is it about retribution? Is it about actually damaging? Is it about getting an advantage on the battlefield? Or if they're going to be hammered on the Arctic fleet and X, Y, and Z, will that actually happen? And so there's an awful lot that can be said. And also, you know, in terms of, you know, if one of their rationales is to flex to their own domestic audience, and some people are saying, well, some of the ways that Russia can escalate is to do things like allow Iran to have technological nuclear technology and weaponry tech and knowledge and so on and so forth. But that's a kind of really long game, right? And that's not going to be flexing to their domestic audience. And so you're trying to piece together all of these arguments. And I just conclude at the end of the day that it's highly unlikely that Russia are going to do something like press the red button or use tactical nukes even. I just think it's ridiculous. And so we've seen Ukraine be able to strike very deep into Russia in the places where Western weapons are being requested to strike, and nothing is happening. And I think those red lines should be lifted, and we've got good reason to think that nothing will happen if they were.
And another thing that makes me really have my mind spin is that the US is talking about escalate to de-escalate in other places in the world, while in Ukraine they're so much on the back foot. So yeah, I don't want to really wander into the whole corridors of the White House too much, but yeah, I mean the problem we've seen also in Europe has been that when the Ukrainians have been really on the offensive and succeeding on the battlefield, instead of pushing the gas and giving more aid to enhance that success, they're really not. That it seems like they're more on the break. And
yeah, and I think that might have something to do with something I call the Putin paradox. I think I've spoken about this before to you guys, which is that the better you do, the better Ukraine does against Russia, then the more likely it is that Putin's going to do something completely nuts, because his future is his existence is existentially linked to the outcome of this war in a way that no one else is. So if Russia loses war, then he loses his life, or he's in a gulag, or whatever, and that's different. So if Ukraine loses war, Zelensky either lives his life out in Ukraine somewhere that's not taken over, or he moves to America or whatever. There's a real difference there. So that means that Putin is more likely, you could argue, to do something nuts, and that could feed into this anti-escalation rationale that the White House might have, which is the better Ukraine are doing, the more likely it is that Putin's going to lose a plot and do something nuts.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to fall too much into that whole train of thought. But yeah, I just wanted to say, Brian brought this up. This is the correct one, right? The one from Tatarigami, where he talks about
yes,
the shipping
that's
containers.
the correct one. Yes, that's the one.
And this is, I would say, an example where Ukraine is escalating because they were reaching farther and hitting ammo depots farther in than they used to, and hitting something that would cause more escalation for Ukraine, because apparently this was Iranian missiles, right? Or was it North Korean
No.
ones?
This is North Korean artillery shells.
North Korean ammo. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So if you see it on the like the rail cars, that's those are the shipping containers. So they are shipping ammunition from North Korea to I think a port in Russia. I don't remember its name. It's been like what 2023's. Yeah, it's almost been a year for this. So what they have been doing is they had been shipping ammunition from a port in North Korea to Russia, and then Russia was using trains to basically transport this ammunition to this forward base that's nearby to the front lines. If you also see carefully, you can see the new revertments that were dug inside over there. Those are the new revertments that I'm talking about, and those are storing ammunition. I think there would be another image showing the ammunition inside it. Is there? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So you can see the ammo crates are inside the revertments, and they are not storing it inside their pre-built ammo storages. It's just being stored out in the open. So just one strike and everything's gonna catch fire.
Just to let people know, and I put a link in the live chat, but CSIS and Beyond Parallel have been following this very closely. Back in February, they did a really big report on it. As I say, links in the live chat. And I think they've done other reports that have mapped the route that this ammo takes from North Korea, as you say, all the way to Tikhoretsk there. And it is detailed. It's a really, really good analysis. And it's interesting that they were talking about this this is open source intelligence. This is intelligence that everyone would that the Ukraine and the US will know about, but it's out there in the open. CSIS have done this report, so everyone knows that there's this North Korean North Korean ammunition stored, you know exactly where it's been stored. This is an easy target. Now, there's be so many examples where the Ukrainians could hit and severely damage. It's like there are so many potential targets we could get excited about, and just do the Ukrainians have enough munitions? Do they have enough drones? What's their production capacity for these drones and for these missiles, etc., etc.?
Yeah, because Washington actually first released images of the shipping containers, like uh, I think it was in a press briefing that they did, and with their complete Uncle Sam resolution. That's 15 centimeters for the ones that I'm saying. That's like the best resolution that you can get as of now. So it was a like it was, I think it was a rip off directly from the DNI briefings, but they were the first ones who talked about it, and then they basically basically CSIS, as you said, did a huge report on it, and then Tatarigami, and I remember reading it from there. Yeah, and by the way, the image that you just showed, that's from Tikhoretsk. That's the that's from, I think, Brady Afric. Yeah, that Brady Afric, cool guy. So he's the one who posted I think that's Sentinel-2 image. Yeah, Sentinel-2, and I think he had written a custom script which basically puts the SWIR band with the true color image, so it's easier for visualization. And uh, you can see, like, as the ammo is just stored in the open, it's catching fire, so there's nothing they can do. And that's why you saw the spectacular explosions. That's the reason why, because everything is just stored in the open, and it's just a big powder keg that's going to blow up any moment, any time you like throw a drone or a cruise missile. I don't know, and I don't want to comment on any of it.
Yeah, that's the CSIS
Yes,
report. It's a
yeah.
really good article, that. So, and they've got that interactive map that you've just clicked on, that gives you the route and all the different sort of points along there.
Yeah, zoom into that. Yeah, zoom into that. That's actually, yeah, that's the one where you can see those images of those crates being loaded and everything. This is the key to understanding why Tikhoretsk was so important to the Russians. You can see how these blue crates that are there, those are just for ammunition. Yeah, and by the way, that's Maxar resolution, so I think that's Maxar, right? Yeah, so you can see those ammo crates really clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Estonian, I don't know if Daniele's, I don't know what he's going to be talking about later, but the Estonian intelligence has stated that this could be 3 months worth of ammunition. And I think there's a lot of speculation here, but you know, the number of 750,000 artillery shells, who knows? But it could be, it could be really, really impactful.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, we honestly do not know how
Yeah,
much the
yeah,
Russians use in a day, right?
yeah,
It can be just a day's worth or a week's worth. So, or also, as the Estonian intelligence stated, that it can be 3 months worth.
yeah.
So there is, there is no way, unless you have some sort of an human intelligence source that is saying how much of ammunition that was stored over there, and then they're gonna make an estimate about it, because there's no way using satellites you're gonna be counting how many crates of ammunition is there, right? like uh, like even in the CSIS article, they have just made assumptions and probabilities rather than just uh, going to straight facts. And yeah, that's it. There's the reason why you can see that the Tikhoretsk ammunition depot is in such a strategic spot, because it's so close to the front lines, but at the same time far away from Ukraine frequent Ukrainian attacks. And you can also see the highways that are basically leading in and out of that region. So if the Russians want it by highway, I mean by road, they can get it. If they want it via rails, they can get it. So That's why that is in one of the most strategic locations that it could be in.
And the classic maxim is that you don't want to present problems to the enemy. You want to present dilemmas where there is no solution. Problems have solutions, dilemmas have least worst option. And so when it comes to these sorts of targets, the Ukrainians will know full well, I assume, where every single ammunition depot of decent size is going to be in Russia, as well as all these other potential targets. And the Russians are going to be, or well, are presented with especially with what they've seen for the last week, they've got this problem where they've got a blanket that is not big enough to cover their bed. So they've got air defenses that are not extensive enough to cover that. Russia's a massive country and they have spread out targets. And where do they put those air defenses? If they put them over here, it's like pulling the cover over to this area to cover yourself over here, but then your feet are then out in the cold. So then you pull the blanket to cover your feet and now your shoulders, so the blanket is too small for Russia. Where do they protect? What do they choose to protect? Because now it was going to be I think possibly Ukrainians were being very clever, which is hit all these oil refineries, hit these oil depots. Then Russia's scrabbling around, maybe moving their air defenses to start protecting oil infrastructure. And then Ukraine hits these ammo depots massively. And now Russia has to think, well, where are we protecting our ammo depots enough? What's Ukraine going to hit this next week? And that's just keeping the Russians guessing. And there just simply isn't enough air defense to do the job.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct, because making like a air defense vehicle that is basically capable of intercepting like a ton of drones or like cruise missiles is very hard. You cannot just have a ZSU over there firing away blindly into the night for intercepting a cruise missile, right? It's very difficult for them to catch up, and there is like a reason to believe that Russians are basically running out of air defense capabilities. I mean, it wouldn't be like a, how do I say this? I mean, even we saw it in the Kursk offensive that Ukrainian planes were flying freely over the skies, and there was nothing that was protecting them. If the Russians had air defense like the Tor or the Shilka, they would be like firing at anything that would fly, but there was nothing, right? So
Another dilemma which they've caused on the Russians now is these ammo depots. Even if this one is 500 kilometers away, it's very well connected with train to resupply the frontline ammo depots. And apparently, both these have been directly shipping ammo to the front lines.
Sorry for cutting in. The one that's the 107th is actually important for one reason. That's because it was storing KN-23 missiles. So for the folks that are not familiar with KN-23 missiles, is basically the North Korean ballistic missile that was supplied to the Russians by the North Koreans, and this was one of the missiles that actually had hit Kiev or Kharkiv. I don't remember properly that, and it had left a really huge.
That was near Kyiv, I think.
Yeah, it was near. I think it was during May, right?
Yeah,
Or
sometime back.
January or May. I don't remember it properly, and because it was storing this, and also S300 and S400 what was that, S300 S400 launches, right? I mean the ammunition for it, so that's why it was a priority target. And uh, yeah, Matthew, around 50%. But the thing is, if you launch 10, 5 is going to land, right? 5 is going to land it, and it's basically a rocket that's basically a fertilizer tin can, right? It's going to explode anywhere it's going to fall. So
by the way, Brian is answering to those who might be listening. Someone in the live chat said, weren't the KN-23s reported to have failure rates of around 50%?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So the thing is, the 5 missiles that are going to be successfully launched and is going to land in the middle of Kyiv, you're going to have a lot of dead people, right? So just cutting this thing off, basically the entire thing, that's really important for them, because these cruise missiles do pose a lot of threat. You cannot just disregard some sort of an equipment by saying, oh yeah, it has a 50% failure rate, or it has a 60% failure rate. But at the end of the day, when you launch 10, even if 4 land, what if it lands on a hospital? You're going to have a lot of dead casualties. So that's why hitting these ammunition depots is very important.
Yes, and one thing I wanted to say about the whole dilemma thing is that these ammo depots are very large, right? They can room enormous, or could room enormous amounts of ammunition, especially if you also include that they were storing it outdoor. And before I'm going to talk, I should actually introduce Daniele, which joined us. Sorry, Daniele. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing? Well, anyways, talk when you're free, Daniele.
Yes, walk us through your dilemma.
My microphone. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome,
evening,
Daniele. Good evening. Yeah, so the dilemma is these were very, very large ammo depots, and they were, as we've seen, both of them, they were storing ammo both inside bunkers. Apparently, also some of the bunkers were overfilled, so there were ammo basically just sticking out from the hangar doors that were supposed to be closed, of course, the armored doors, and all around the base. And this was very useful for the Russians because they use something called a push logistics system, where they just say, okay, we want a certain amount of ammo to flow to this ammo depot every month. And they're just going to continue to push it, even if they don't use it all. And the Russians did actually pull a lot of ammo away from some of the parts of the front lines where Ukraine could hit with HIMARS and other long-range artillery weapons. So they had to pull their frontline ammo depots away because, as we saw, I guess it was summer 2022, there was quite a lot of these ammo depots going up, and they were pretty large explosions as well, especially to be like frontline magazines. And one of the reasons were the push logistics systems, when the Russians couldn't use up their ammo that they got from the logistics systems, it just piled up. And when they don't have these huge ammo depots anymore, where are they going to push it to? It's going to be a dilemma for them. Are they going to just continue to push it straight to the front lines again?
And what I was talking about earlier, Erlend, with regard to asymmetries and making sure that whatever domain we're talking about, Ukraine has the advantage in some kind of way. In order to win this war, they need the advantage everywhere they can get it. And one of them, where Ukraine definitely has the advantage, is in ammunition storage. So, and I've argued that, and I don't know if this is at all doable, maybe some of you guys can chime in on this, and I think this is possibly relevant to F-16 storage, if you like. So Ukraine is in a great position where they can, if they need to, just store massive amounts of ammunition in Poland and Germany, right? And they can keep it out there, and that is safe. The Russians are not going to strike those ammo depots. So we have a situation where Russia has that problem, but Ukraine doesn't. And Ukraine therefore needs to absolutely hammer that asymmetry and gain that advantage. And I've long argued that with F-16s, they should keep them in Romania and Poland and Germany or whatever for maintenance, right? And then every time they need them, fly them out to a forward operating base and refuel, take off from there, do your mission, fly back, and then fly all the way back. I mean, it's going to be a bit logistically a bit of a headache, but your F-16s will be safe and kept, you know, in these airfields in Romania or Poland or whatever. And that's kind of the similar thing, which is keep as much kit outside of Ukraine as possible with your allies and bring it in when you need it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's politically viable to do that, but of course it would be an advantage. But I want to say that Ukraine at least has done some reforms from the Soviet system when it comes to the push logistics system. Of course, there's been these issues have been present in Ukraine as well, but to a much less of an extent, possibly also because they never really have enough ammo to overfill their frontline magazines. So they're not going to have the same.
It's a Japanese just-in-time like logistics, isn't it? Like just-in-time, like get it, use it, get it, use it.
But that's really what you want to have on the front lines too.
Well,
you want to have the ammo arriving just in time, because you don't want these enormous pileups. And if Ukraine can continue to do this, and also with a further extent than what they've done now, they might start creating some holes in the logistics systems for ammo, and that could be very, very bad for the Russians. But I think we will have to see this continuing over quite a long period, where persistent strikes on ammo depots and logistics centers.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take a bit of time, because the Soviets, I mean, the Ukrainian military structure is still embedded in its Soviet mindset, and it's gonna take time to go away. I mean, you cannot just reform a country in one night, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, so it's gonna take a lot of time. But it's slowly advancing to the stage where it has recently announced that 14,000 of its 14K of its equipment is going to be up to the NATO standards, and it's a really good thing to hear. They're slowly learning and building up their tactics and modifying them according to the NATO standards, because NATO are the ones who know how to basically fight the Russians, right? They have been running the numbers for like what decades. If the Soviets come through this area, then how are we going to deal with them? So to be honest, until the entire NATO mindset does not set in for the Ukrainian generals and the top echelons of the military, it's going to take time. But at the same time, we are seeing good signs for it.
Matthew said, and someone said this on one of my threads when I mentioned the whole put the F-16s outside of Ukraine if you possibly can. And I know it'll add air time to the airframes, flight time, and that's an issue. But this was a tactic used. I don't know the details, but either and or possibly the Korean War and the Vietnam War, where the Chinese Soviet planes were kept outside, and I don't know the details, but there is precedence for that in history, keeping planes outside the countries that they're fighting in and pretending that they're X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I tried to find a segue to what Daniele wants to talk about, but I didn't. So, Daniele, what's your topic for us today? Because I know
talking about things that are foreign in countries where they shouldn't be. Was that what you're going to say?
Maybe. Well,
I'm joking, Daniele.
I guess engineering art is foreign to the Russians, right? Or is it?
Well, it depends on what art means, because if art means creating very nice fireworks, yeah, they are very, very good on that. Well, first of all, just to give some context, we started to do the damage assessment with Brian and all the rest of the teams immediately after the event. And that night, essentially, most of the analysis was already done. And I was saying, what could be interesting to look? Then I was trying to understand why this strike looks so effective. And so probably also by professional deformation, I start to look on how these sites, especially those that you are looking at the moment, were built. Because I said, okay, these are pretty new. Maybe there is chance that there is some kind of information about the building process of these ECM. Which means, for who doesn't know, ECM stands for hard-covered magazine, and normally is protected shelter for any kind of hazardous material, from ammunition to propellant, and or explosives, of course. And so by using Google Earth mainly, which relies on Maxar and Airbus CNES imagery, I start to look on Toropets site, but the new area, the one that essentially appear to be mostly affected by the blast, by the attack. And so what I saw immediately is in this image you can see the same area, but in 3 different timeline. The first one on the left is very old. I think it's 2013, if not 11. I think 13. So at this stage, probably they start to do some preliminary work. So they start to build the roads, start to probably explore the ground. In fact, you can see this forest has some holes. These were made by probably the construction worker. And then immediately after, a year after, you can see that essentially it was completely cleared. And in a year and a half, you have everything built. So this in the last picture, I think it's 2015, and wasn't completely finished, but essentially was very much at the end. And so I start to look at different ECM, and here you can see essentially the same ECM in 3 different time steps. I think the first 2 images are the exact same ECM. The other one is one next, because they are more or less the same. I measured many of them, and they are all around 30 by 40 meter, roughly. And you can see that they share the same type of construction sequence. At the beginning, you should lay foundation. We have no sign of very deep foundation. I tried to look very hard on different other sites. I never found anything. So I don't know how the foundation of these building have been created in such large extent. You can see from the previous one is a lot of these bunkers, and I didn't see any type of movement of earth, because foundation needs you to excavate a little bit. So for this reason, in the thread, I say that there is no sign of excavation, at least that I can appreciate. Then they start. The first phase is creating the walls, the side walls, with some internal armor, probably steel beams. Then immediately after, you can see the roof built. These ECM can be built in 2 different configuration. One is a flat roof, the one that the Russian has chosen in this case, which has nothing wrong, is a design that we use as well, and also the arched one. So it depends mostly by the dimension and the different type of material and terrain that you have. So is nothing wrong with the type of design. Now, after this, the central stage, there is the final one, but essentially there is a missing part, the creation of the armored roof, which you can see here. Not the next one. You can see that there is a quite large increase in thickness from the top. Now, I tried to measure these, and Brian will agree with me that it's very empirical at this point. So because the angle, I tried to do some comparison with the tracks. There were a couple of Urals around, so I was able more or less to get it around the 2.5 meter of height. But also you can, yes, go on, Brian, please.
The funny thing is, the roof that you mentioned is on the top. In many of the cases, like when I actually had a chance to look at high resolution imagery, these roofs have had holes in them. They have basically that the ECM, which is basically an earth covered magazine, should have earth on top of it, right?
Yes.
These ones do not have any kind of earth on them. These ones just have big holes that have smoke coming out of it right
yes.
now.
The
These roofs are so thin that even standing on them at this point is gonna put you 2 feet down the Hamo Depot, I guess.
Well, I don't know that, Brian, but what you say is correct, and I want to say this very clearly. In NATO, this type of depot would be classified as a different category, because we have 3 categories: 7 bar, 3 bar, and unclassified. So the first 2 are essentially the most harder, and then the third one it doesn't mean that it's less secure, but essentially for different reasons you may need to do some change in your design. If you don't feel in any of these categories, you feel in that. Now, why these bunkers are very, very strange? First of all, you have this perforation on the top. Now, perforation of the top are always prevented because you essentially weaken the structure. In many other type of bunker, you have vents, which are important, don't take me wrong, but they are not done on the flat surface, especially in flat roof like this. You don't do that because you are weakening the roof. So if you have something following you at very high speed, those large perforation, you can see there are 8, can constitute a weakening spot. The other very big missing part, as you properly said, is the soil cover. In any case, an ECM, to be classified as ECM, doesn't matter how protective it is for the public or for the content, have to be covered by soil for a minimum 60 centimeter of soil, and the soil need to be dragged and properly compacted, kept with the proper number of gravel. So it's a very, very detailed procedure on how you have to cover them. These have nothing, probably just a spoon of terrain. In fact, in some of the images which I saw also on another map system, which is Yandex, you can even see water dripping on the concrete and making stains. So this means that there was no soil at all on the top. And another point that is particularly strange, as I said, is the very thin walls. I spoke with a couple of friends, and they all concluded that if I can get a higher resolution, we can probably measure those dimensions, but it's not that thick. It's not going to be very protective, even in case of an explosion. It's very cheaply made.
Why do you want the walls to be thick so that they can protect from an explosion? I think there are more reasons than one, right?
Yes, I mean, in the worst case scenario, you want the explosion to don't deflagrate, but escape from vents, and in the very, very worst, from the door. You don't want this explosion to propagate and essentially transform your bunker in a bomb, which instead is what happened in some cases. So another point of very much failure, which is evident, is the door. The door are not reinforced, are steel door. These are not glass door. I've seen, these are not. And even the armor around them is essentially absent. I think they planned to put blast door, but then because they probably run out of money, they have to do this very approximate contraption to make the door smaller. The light of the door is much larger, but then they made this smaller one because they can fit it. So these and this come from Toropets. This come from Toropets. This is the only one image they found directly from Toropets. So, and this should be the front of one of these ECM. So these are very bad sign for a site that is a completely new and was announced around 2009 as a huge project in Russia to put under safeguard this very large amount of ammunition also left from Soviet Union that was causing concern because it was essentially left in the open. And so this is to give to the audience the understanding that even by using some minimal concept of engineering and science and looking at the image, you can start to understand that this site wasn't up to the task, probably was built in rush to meet some kind of demand, and also probably corruption. I'm quite sure about corruption because there is no way you can make this wrong all the time in all these different ECM, around 76. And if you go not to this one, I sent to you the one. There is another slide that show another bunker in Kotovo, which is not far away. So this is another slide that I created just to explain how the magazine front respect to the earth should be done. You can see that there is a certain proportion from a height to vertical direction of the soil, and this was I mean, you can even see in this image that there is sign of stains on the roof. You can see the concrete. So there was not even 30 millimeter of soil on this. If you go to the next one, I start to look around, and no, there is another one which is from another new Ammo Depot, which essentially share the exact same design flow. The one that instead that you are looking here is Longtown in UK. This is an Ammo Depot, as it should be. You see, these ECM are not completely covered in earth, but they are completely buried into the ground. They are connected by trenches, and they are also very much equally spaced. There is no way to leave around ammunition. There is no way to have anything left there to make cook off and cause a chain reaction. And this is how you should try to protect your valuable asset. And this is something that in Russia you can't see. Any ammunition depot that you look has the same design flows. And the one that I recently covered also in Oktyabrski, I think, yeah, that has been attacked last night, share the same issues. Even worse, they don't even have ECM. They just have open air depot, essentially. I've sent you also those images if you want to share them. I don't know if there is any question you want to.
I just can't help but think that, I don't want to say, oh, look how wonderful Britain or the US is in terms of X, Y, and Z, but I just can't think that you would have ammunition depots in the UK not even built properly, let alone like maintained properly to the degree that seems to be happening in Russia. It's so endemic that I guess the only realistic explanation is indeed corruption. But
yeah. And I honestly was surprised on how blatant and evident the flow are, and these explain also the type of strike that we have seen. Because I mean, taking out ammunition exposed to the environment is okay. I mean, it's something that happened, but you know what I mean. Having this type of strike means that you don't have the capability, and these are not things that can be fixed. Those depots are wrongly designed, wrongly built. You have to rebuild from scratch. And how you can do in the middle of a war. These are not things that can be sorted. And think about that, even if some of those ammunition, some of those depots are okay, so they survived. What this create a bigger dilemma, because now what they have to do, they have to empty them, exposing them to the risk of having them hit again. So I mean, is really much a very dire situation at the moment. And this image instead is from this recent attack. And in this case, what I want to show is the fact that you can see that there is a much more precise strike. So instead of having a large amount of drone and destruction along the entire site, you can see that in this case was pretty much concentrated, especially in the northern part, in that area. And in the thread that I made, essentially, I tried to explain why this happened. And I know that you already spoke about this, Jonathan, I think today. And the reason is that I don't know if we have the slide, but the main reason is the ammunition in this depot were essentially divided in two sections. Thank you, Erlend. The northern side, which essentially you see this is a very large, like an 8. The top one, where you can see most of the covered shelter, and then the southern part, which has these open heart depot. Now these, since 2000, I had the image between 2021 and 2023, they have been depleted. So I don't think even now there were that much. Also, the central storage in the center of the ammo depot is completely gone by 2023. Maybe they have been, of course, an in and out, but I think due to the extensive use of ammunition, and this should be, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, this should be a rocket artillery ammunition depot, was pretty much used. And but what was attacked was the area where which is closer to the railway and closer to essentially the logistic part. And my belief is that they decide to attack that area because it's the area that essentially stocks and moves the ammunition that are on the point of going out. And then also, and this is a speculation, this attack at least has been claimed to be performed by SBU, so an area that is more close to intelligence as well. So maybe this was a strike done with even more information about what to hit, where, and when. And yeah, I don't know if there are also other slides loaded. There were more detailed views of some of the stockpile in case someone is able to identify what type of missile. I guess some were Grad, but there were also larger rocket like this one. This one is like 3 of these pits in 2021. How they look like? They were pretty much fully packed, and then after they are completely empty. I created also an animation. I don't know if it's possible to show animation on the so yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, it's also, well, it's been claimed by the guy from the Estonian intelligence who's made a claim that there's maybe 3 months worth of ammunition, etc., etc. Anton Gerashchenko said, according to the head of the Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center, Colonel Ants Kiviselg, the ammunition, which had not yet been stored indoors, was delivered to the depot by train just before the attack was launched. After it, the ammunition in the yard detonated along with the bunkers and depots. So there's also, could be the case that there was quite a lot of ammunition waiting to be either stored badly somewhere else or stored correctly somewhere else. I don't know, but just having been offloaded off the trains. But so that could be lucky. It could be exactly what was intended. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We will never know. And regarding the estimation of how much is lost, I agree with Brian. It's very difficult. I don't think it's small, but it's very difficult to estimate. And for sure, if there is any effect, we have to wait a few weeks before, at least. And regarding, I read a very intelligent question about the fact that we can estimate by earthquakes the amount of TNT equivalent. And this conversion has been done. I sent to the guys on the chat a website where this is a website about that speak mostly about earthquake, and they of course reported these type of seismic activity, and I think is the explosion is classified 2.8, so it's very light. And in terms of TNT, I'm sorry to say that it's very minimal, is around 245 kilograms, so it's not that much. But the reason for that is there are many. First of all, because it's not very easy to convert an explosion that happened to the ground and then diffuse. So there are many factors that affect that measurement. And the second is that in order, most of the explosion happen like in sequence, some isolated, some are just burn out, because not always you have an explosion. So it's very difficult to say just from a single event, the big blast essentially, how much material has been damaged or destroyed. But so if we want to see the effect, probably we will have to wait a few weeks at least. Yeah, and yeah.
One other thing that I don't know how accurate this is, but a chap called Roy, a Canadian chap on a random bloke called Roy on Twitter, so it must be true. No, one of the sources that sometimes pops up says the Russians describe Ukrainian long-range drone strike tactics to defeat air defenses. A small initial decoy wave approaches at high altitude on the obvious frontal attack vector to engage and distract the air defense. The main wave bypasses the target at very low altitudes, 10 to 20 meters, utilizing terrain features to avoid radar detection. Then the attack comes from the rear and the flanks. I don't know if that is pertinent to anything that's been mentioned, but just thought I'd throw that nugget in there as well. But might or might not be true, so who knows?
Roy is a good aggregator. That's my comment, but it's content from Telegram. You know, we don't really know who wrote it.
Yeah.
But I would. There's no reason to believe that Ukraine hasn't done quite a lot of work on how to design their attack vectors.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable to assume at least some degree of ingenuity to defeat air defenses has been done. I think that was like the main points of our analysis, unless Brian and Daniele has something that you wanted to add.
I mean, there's nothing else. I mean, we just have to wait and see what gets hit next. It's tiring to like write reports about this stuff and everything, but yeah. I mean, I'm happy about how Ukraine has been going around blowing these things up and basically like trying its best to win the war. I mean, it's complete David versus Goliath situation, but still we persevere, right?
But I mean, it's really important this because I've said for several years now is that the best way to win this war for Ukraine is to not lose their own troops in doing whatever they do. So this kind of distance war is exactly what they need to do. You know, rather than throwing troops into Tikhoretsk to defend it, or the Russians throwing troops into Tikhoretsk to attack it, you just hammer the other side's ability to wage war using missiles and drones. And that's why the top order of the day for the Ukrainians is to produce as many freaking long range drones and missiles as they possibly can. It's just like and throw them all at Russia as much as possible, because you get these successes if you do so, and Russia doesn't have the capability or the capacity, more accurately, to shoot these things down. And that's where, you know, it's like I said, it's about asymmetries. I mean, it's about having more stuff than the other side and using it better. So where Russia fire a lot of stuff into Ukraine, they're doing a lot of hitting civilian infrastructure. Now, as terrible as that is, that has not as much military significance and utility. And the Ukrainians are getting so much more bang for their buck with every strike. And so if they do have fewer missiles and drones, and I think the Russians have really ramped up their Shahed production, Ukraine are either shooting. So the interception rate at the moment is 95 to 100% on most nights of Shahed drones, either with electronic warfare or interceptions. And the Russians are not hitting as valuable targets as they could do. And that's been the case throughout the war. They have improved, but it's still like, this is an asymmetry that Ukraine have to take advantage of and do it as quickly and as overwhelmingly as they possibly can.
Yes, that's correct. Oh yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Another important point is that now Ukraine has started to become more aggressive in fighting ISR drones, which has been like a very big issues for the.
That's intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones.
Yes, Zala and all other long-range, high-altitude drones that were essentially used to target different type of installation. Even civilian, unfortunately, and to perform strikes with Iskander and other high precision weapon. So if the Ukrainians if Ukraine will continue to sustain this type of campaign, at some point effect will be very, very important. And also my hope is that this type of strike will also go against the industrial sector that sustain the war machine. And I know that Russia cannot produce enough, and so it tends to buy from Iran and North Korea. But I think if you can also put on their needs, their manufacture sector that anyway has a say inside the quota of ammunition and vehicle that are produced or refurbished, I think that will start to become a very big problem for Russia. And I mean, at this point, I think many people are honestly also rightfully probably concerned about the advances that Russia is doing in the Donbass. But what I think is very important to understand is not only the advantage, the movement of the enemy, but also its capability of sustain that type of war. Because how much is sustainable this? Because most of the people say, "Oh, but Russia is big, so it must, it must take a lot of punches." But it's not like a nation works. It's not like you are bigger, so you are going to support anything. Of course, they have a lot of heritage from Soviet Union, but that heritage, that stock of stuff is ending, it's finishing. And once it's over, it's over. It's not going to go back. So I think time is not. You remember, this war started with the idea time is on Russia side. I think there is starting to become an inversion of the thing.
This is really important. It's a really important point with regard to personnel. It's something I've said a number of times before, which is you get and there is obviously it's super important that Russia have 144 million people that they can draw from, and Ukraine has 44 million people, whatever the numbers are, although that's all changed now. But and you think, prima facie that Russia have a much greater chance of winning because they can just draw on their human beings for a much longer time because they have a much bigger pool. But of course, there's a massive difference here. So for Ukraine, this is an existential fight. And if they don't fight, you lose your entire country, you get wiped out, genocide, etc., all the kind of worst things you can think of. Whereas if Russia don't win, it affects Russia in no tangible way domestically and inside Russia. Like this is not an existential fight for Russia. So when you're talking about people being willing to go and fight for a cause, you have far more Ukrainians as a proportion of their population that will be willing to fight, for that cause because it's existentially important. Although obviously there are draft dodges, etc. But for Russia, you'll reach a threshold where the population go, no, actually this is not cool, and we're not up for sending our fathers, sons, brothers, and cousins to this war that is kind of fairly unnecessary. That threshold is much higher for the Russians than it is for the Ukrainians. Much lower for the Russians. For the Ukrainians, they'll keep going because they have no choice. But the Russians essentially kind of do, although choice is probably the wrong word. But hopefully I'm making myself understood.
Absolutely. I just wanted to pull up what we have from Anders' map of geolocated long-range drone strikes. And, it's definitely, you can see that the Ukrainians have been trying hard, right? There's a lot more that aren't geolocated though. So I think it's a little bit incomplete. But if we go and say, even just Russian here. Oops. So no, it doesn't take the Shaheds. I think.
And I was just looking earlier, just while Daniele was speaking, and just like there was someone saying that another airbase was here at some point recently, and that there are surely going to be an awful lot of places that the Ukrainians are hitting that we don't even know about because you are relying really solely on open source intelligence with regard to people uploading videos of explosions. Now, if this is a base out in the middle of nowhere doing, quite a secretive place, so you're not necessarily going to know that the Ukrainians have hit that. So, the same goes the other way, of course, but we don't always know about these places that have been hit. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to compare the two because now I've basically plotted in Shaheds and Russian airstrikes or missile strikes. All the blue ones are active air defense, so yeah, I would like to be able to filter them out, but you can see the difference. I mean, if you look on the escalation map, Ukraine is definitely still playing enormous catch up when it comes to long range strikes. So yeah.
But that's where it comes down to what sort of strikes, how much bang for your buck are you getting, how how militarily significant are these strikes? And I think there is arguably a difference. And although that's changed over the course of the war, Russia have a tendency, I don't know whether it's because their ordnance is less accurate, but they have a tendency to fling a lot of ordnance in either indiscriminately, or it's more accurate and they don't really care, or they are aiming for civilians. And I just don't think that gives you enough bang for your buck.
Obviously not. And the thing is, if you cannot hit military targets reliably or a strategic target reliably, what are you going to do? And they're hitting infrastructure. So that's definitely one thing they've been trying. And when they can't hit infrastructure, then they hit civilians. I don't want to necessarily believe that the main effort is to hit apartments building, but they seem to do it over and over again. So yeah, I guess we should go towards Germany to Ukraine. So depending on your schedule, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'll probably have to shoot off to just make sure that my family still know what I look like.